This is a special Majority Report broadcast. The first and perhaps last presidential debate between...
Or last presidential debate ever.
Or last...
If it goes a certain kind of way.
I mean, who knows? Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the thriller in Philadelphia. Okay, here we go.
That sucks so much.
What?
The thriller in Philadelphia?
Thriller in Philadelphia. All right.
I liked it.
Folks, Sam Cedar, Emma Vigland, Pizza, Matt.
Claire McCaskill.
All right, we have a problem. We should just tell you right up front. In the studio, we have been infested with fruit flies for whatever reason. We haven't been able to establish it.
It's probably all the apples.
Hey, dude, don't tell, do you plan this shit at all? We're doing this at Majority Report Live, youtube.com/Majority Report Live.
You actually...
Okay, so I just want people to understand that, nobody's going to hear you on that. For the folks who are watching us on our burner channel, we're a little bit nervous.
It's the live events channel.
It's the live events channel, and the YouTube, the ABC people are, Disney is they're so woke that they're trying to keep
enclose elections.
Yeah, they're trying to keep people from streaming this. Apparently, just saving it for all the different cable news networks, and so we're at our burner account. But of course, at any time, you can always go to majority.fm. You can watch it there. We will be back on our main channel at 11 p.m. There's a swarm of flies in here.
It's just so annoying.
I don't know what's going on. But nevertheless, so let's just go with this. What do you think we should be looking for tonight, Emma? We have about 7 minutes.
Yeah, so I guess I think Trump is going to be acutely aware that the entire right-wing media ecosystem has been imploring him not to go personal, and by personal, they mean don't be racist, don't be sexist towards her.
Call her stupid.
That kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, a lot. I was just feeling a little bit
racist, sexist person on the
exactly.
stage.
Why would you even need to tell me that?
I was feeling a little pessimistic about it because it was like, okay, even he can understand, like, this isn't the way to go. He was more restrained in the debate with Biden, but I thought about it a little bit more, and he just is so triggered so easily by her. I think she's going to be able to do it, but she's going to have a counterattack ready if he doesn't bite at the original stuff that she tries to goad him into. And then the other thing to look out for, I think, is one, like, does she say anything differently in terms of Gaza policy?
No.
Does she?
I already answered that.
Yeah, I don't think she
will
will.
Not happen.
But I think maybe she will try to differentiate herself from Trump, at least in that regard, because in Michigan that may be important.
You said today she's going to say. You said this on the program today. She's going to call him out for using Palestinian as a slur.
Right.
I think, like, from a perspective of a progressive, we're not going to hear a ton of stuff that we're going to like.
Maybe stuff on the economy, I think, might be good because she has to go out a little bit more on a limb on that in that regard.
Obama versus Romney would be a nice model for her to follow, like out of touch rich guy. Yeah.
Yes.
I think there's going to be some of that. But,
well, and then also the idea, like, don't take my word for it. Look at his record. He did give taxes to the wealthy. He did say that he was going to build the border wall, and then he lied about it. Just look at his record. She doesn't need to be fast. She doesn't need to be past facing or, like, basically, like, moralizing about the way he acts. She can gesture towards it with small statements and then pivot to defining herself. That's what I think is the best way to go.
I think the And there's two things, and I had mentioned this in the preview that I had just done on the channel, but the first is, in terms of, like, how this debate goes, broadly speaking, my understanding is that the deal that ABC and the two candidates cut said that ABC can make the unilateral decision to unmute the mics the plan is to mute the mics while one person is talking. That was the way that the Biden thing did. In this one, my understanding is that ABC in the rules can unilaterally decide there's too much crosstalk. We're not hearing what they're saying. We're going to turn the mics on. I am convinced that if they're going to do that, they will only do it if they announce at the top of the thing. And maybe we should go to ABC. Why don't we turn ABC on so that we see the very beginning of it? And then we can switch around, but we could keep it at ABC too. But if they say that at the beginning, just keep your eyes on that. Because if they say that at the beginning, I think they're going to do it. If they don't say it, they're not going to do it.
It stinks that Biden needed these like rules that coddled him so badly that they got to copy and paste it.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And now here's the other thing. I just saw a poll on CNN that showed of undecided, almost 50% of them need to hear more about who Kamala Harris is. Only 18% don't know who Trump is. So you have there, we use the metaphor jump ball for, what Harris's policy will be. It's also her jump ball to get in terms of convincing these voters. Now, my guess is, and I don't have any data on this, my guess is that those people who are undecided are not interested in substantive policy differentials.
Right.
They are interested in demeanor and whether she is a scary, screechy woman.
Or a hysterical one.
Or a hysterical one, or however you want to characterize.
But she can't take the bait, right?
Right. And whether she's going to be angry, all of these sort of like tropes. Is she a socialist? Is she crazy Kamala? Cackling Kamala, whatever
Comrade
it is.
Kamala was
Comrade Kamala, all of that we shall see. So the debate's going to start in, my guess is about 1 minute and 14 seconds based upon the countdown clock on the ABC. Pop them up.
Tonight,
Let's get us into the
Trump
thing.
actually go there? He's
I don't know
questioning racial
who's
identity.
calling me,
He's
but that is
questioning her
now is
intelligence as
not
well,
the
or does he
time.
stick to the issues? Look, this is the largest audience they're likely going to have in this race. It will be interesting to see if Harris can make clear the stark choice before voters. And where does she decide to land her punches? She can punch hard.
Did they
Can
lose
she do
sound?
that
No,
while
you just
rising
lost
above the
sound
needle and coming
because
away? First and
somebody
foremost,
called
we can
me.
see a handshake when the two of them
So
meet for
you
the
can
first
hear it
time.
now.
We didn't back in 2016 when I did that debate. We'll
So
stand
Jonathan
by to
Karl
see
is
that
not
tonight, but
the
first
anchor.
time
Okay.
Who is the
side
anchor?
by
It's David Muir and
together.
Lindsay Davis.
And
are
I
the
have my
moderators.
doubts that we're going to see that.
David
handshake, but
Muir,
what we are gonna
the
see
most
is a
handsome of all the
spirited
anchors.
debate,
That is
and
very
perhaps
true.
the most
But I don't
consequential
necessarily
general
know if,
election
like,
debate
I would
we've
have
ever
preferred
seen,
maybe
because
some
almost
less anchory
certainly
people.
I'd be
the last
curious
one.
if what David
So
Muir's
with
greatest
the
achievement is in
stakes so
reporting,
high,
if anybody knows that off the top of
presidential
their
debate
head.
just moments
I think he's
away.
kind of an empty suit.
We have the
being
entire
Disney
news division
plant.
Looking like a
keeping an
Disney
eye on
prince.
everything.
I know you-
I don't know what to tell you.
Checking on our live blog. It's all
I'm not
gonna
his
be
type,
happening.
so
The
it.
Yep.
debate now, just
Can we
10
put on the
seconds
captions?
away.
Yeah, let's
We
put on the
will be
captions for that
back
feed.
Yeah,
with
we'll
our
do that.
post-game show as soon as it's
Switch
over.
it.
Yep, we just did it.
Right
There we
now,
go.
to David Muir and Lindsay
Oh, they just cut away from Jonathan Carly, sort of.
Tonight, the high-stakes showdown here in Philadelphia between Vice
I
President
will
Kamala
not be
Harris
talking
and former
like this.
President Donald Trump. Their first
I can
face-to-face
show you
meeting in
the
this
world.
presidential election.
Let's see if they-
First face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for
Let's
President
see if they
upended
talk
just
about the
weeks ago.
rules.
President Biden withdrawing after his last debate.
Don't
Donald
forget,
Trump
guys,
now
make
up
sure you
against
tuck
a new
through your
opponent.
nose
The
as you
candidates separated by
introduce the
smallest
debate.
of margins,
So is
essentially
Trump gonna
tied
do
in the
red
polls
power
nationally.
tie and
in
she
the
does
key
navy
battlegrounds,
suit?
including right here in
That's a good
Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
All
I
still
think we know
very
what Trump's
much in
gonna wear.
play.
It's like betting
The
on the
ABC News
Gatorade
presidential
color
debate
that's going to come
starts
out the
right
Super
now.
Bowl.
Starts right now.
This is an ABC News
Well,
special.
I'm also
the most consequential moment
going
of
to
this
do the same
campaign.
thing as
Kamala
the
Harris.
announcer. We've all been trained at the same place to tuck through our nose.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face,
God.
historic. The ABC News presidential debate.
Here we go.
Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
All right. Let's see what they say.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC
Hurry up,
News
it'll-
presidential
Little volume, more
debate.
volume.
We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight.
More volume.
Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the
Yes,
stage in
good.
this unprecedented
Maybe
race
just
for
a little
president.
bit lower.
And I'm Lindsay
Stay here.
Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st.
All right, let's get
of
to
course,
it.
that decision followed
We
his
know.
debate against President Donald Trump
need
in
this
June.
context.
Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's
Oh,
debate.
here we go.
90 minutes
Listen
with
carefully.
2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He
Okay.
chose to deliver the
Nope.
final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the
I
podium
don't think
to the
they'll turn
right.
on the
So
mics.
let's now welcome the candidates.
They
They're right
haven't
next
said it.
to
Vice
each other.
President Kamala
They're probably
Harris
picking
and
up
President
on,
Donald Trump.
They'll pick up on each other. Look how close they are.
This is so weird
Okay.
when there's no
I
audience.
literally
Just make it a
called their
print debate
outfits.
then.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Oh, she introduced herself.
Welcome to you
him.
both.
Have
It's
fun.
wonderful to have you. It's an
God,
honor to have you
she's
both
probably
here
so
tonight.
nervous.
She's
Good
trying.
evening. We are looking
Throw
forward
him
to a
off.
spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country.
Good.
Vice President
That's a good
Harris,
start.
you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people.
Good.
We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000
Just
more
note, the
a
question
year
was, are you better off
because
than you
of
were 4
his
years ago?
policies
She
and
does
his
not look
ideas
backward. She wants to be the
about what
change
should be
agent. She
the
immediately goes
backs
forward.
of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that.
His list is
We're
bad.
doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've
looks
left the
old.
tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before. Probably the worst in our
trying to
nation's
be
history.
so
We were at
rational.
21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has
She's gonna
been
have
a
to say
disaster
price
for
gouging
people, for the
next,
middle
by the way.
class, but for every class. On
Yeah.
top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied
And
right now
stealing
by
pets.
African Americans and
Taking a job.
Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You
here
look
we
at
go.
Springfield, Ohio.
Bingo.
You look at Aurora in Colorado.
Wow.
They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently.
Wow.
These are the people that she and Biden led into our country.
Biden.
And they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of
Whoa.
criminality, and we have to
He
get them
lasted
out. We
about
have to get
30
them out
seconds
fast.
with the calm.
I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get
She's
to
not
immigration
laughing
and
at
border
him, but she
security
looks
during this
bemused,
debate, but
which is
I would
good.
like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love
Price
to.
gouging.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public
His
health
face.
epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances,
She wants to be the
and
change
name-calling.
candidate.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the
So
importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out
I am
there.
not a
I
crook.
haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some
has a
good,
good
some bad.
condescending squint.
But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very
And I closed some
substantially
books.
and create a great
Project
economy
2025.
like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not
called it
since
the China
1917, where
flu.
100 million people died. Has there been anything like it? We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks,
What about
we did things that nobody thought
vaccines?
possible. And people give me
Pokey,
credit
pokey.
for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan
Ooh.
would
That's
actually
a dig.
the needle in
the
That's a
deficit.
dig.
16 Nobel laureates have described his economic
My uncle
plan as
went to
something
MIT,
that would
so,
increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a
Yeah, that's a
recession.
dig.
You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
And I beat Medicare.
I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country.
Good, solid
And
money.
Just to finish
Oh, yeah,
off,
the Wharton thing got 'em.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences. Like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your
I'm
tariffs.
rubbing
You
your glue.
responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point.
Oh, well, this is
when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics.
Marxists are not saying that about China.
But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York.
I think it's higher than the 15. It's 21, but higher than that.
To our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen
a lot of them
to
not
our
criminals,
economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say, They have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue
My
of
God.
abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life
I
president
guarantee
in
you on
American
Twitter right
history.
now,
Then
the conservatives
last month,
are
you said
saying
that your
ABC's in the
administration would
bag.
be great for women and their
100%.
reproductive
They're
rights.
doing a much
In your
better
home
job
state of
than
Florida, you
CNN.
surprised
Well,
many
they'll go
with
after
regard
her
to your
on her
6-week
policies.
abortion ban
Yeah.
because you initially had said that it was too short, and you said, "quote
But you win
I'm
this
going to be
thing in the
voting
first
that we
20
need
minutes.
more than
That's-
6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job.
No, he's talking
but
about
the
Virginia.
governor
He's saying the
before,
wrong state.
he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll
Youngkin.
execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because
talking about
that
Ralph
predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her
Tangential
vice
thinking.
presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is
Insane
born,
lie.
is okay. And that's not okay with
Well,
me.
I gotta
Hence the
say,
vote.
I'm
But
gonna
what I did
think
is something
again about Tim
for
Walz.
52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v.
Tampa
Wade
Tim.
into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6
West
Supreme
That's
Court
what it
justices,
means to be a mighty man of valor.
we were able to do that. Now, I believe
Genius
in the
and heart and
exceptions for
strength?
rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened.
That is
happened. Now,
not true.
Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual
that mean
state
to
is
people?
voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Now, I get your response to it, President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith
I was just thinking.
or
I was
deeply
thinking.
held
Just
beliefs
thinking.
to agree.
We're gonna get
the
Medicaid.
government and
We're gonna
Donald
beat
Trump
Medicare.
certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women
Biden would be like,
around our
"Abortion's
country.
icky."
You want to talk about this is what people
it's
wanted?
fine.
Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make
This is her
decisions
strongest
about
segment,
one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she
I've
goes
never heard
again.
of-
It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans,
Demobilize.
and everybody else.
We got what you
and
wanted, what you
every
just said
legal
happened.
scholar wanted it to be
Do
brought
abortion
back
out your
into the
car.
states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart.
It's doing it now,
and they've
dummy.
wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again,
That's
it's
not
two
a
things.
no.
Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress.
yes.
She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She
not
can't
a- I'll
get the
veto
vote. She
it,
won't
Trump.
even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a
Tangential
total
thinking as a
catastrophe.
symptom?
Your Supreme
The
Court
student loans,
justices
and then
axed
And
it.
her,
Republican,
I think probably her boss,
states.
if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out and got rejected again by the Supreme Court.
That I
so all
picked.
these
I
students
think
got
people are
taunted
looking at
with
this
whole
and going
thing
like,
about
what is
this
he
whole
talking
idea.
about?
And how
People
unfair
don't
that
know
would have
these
been Part of the
issues.
reason
Tangential
they lost
thinking.
to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with JD. In all fairness, JD.
I never talked
With
to
your
you.
VP?
I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we
Bad
don't
luck
have
for
to
him.
discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get
He's
student
afraid
loans.
of
She couldn't
saying
get
that he
student
would
loans.
be.
They didn't even come close
We
to
don't
getting
have to
student
discuss
loans.
it.
We don't
They
have to
taunted
discuss it. Why would we
young
discuss it?
people
What
and
other,
a lot of
like,
other people that had
edgelords
loans.
that support
They can
Trump
never
for
get
like
this approved.
populist reasons?
So it
Think about
doesn't
that.
matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I
Respond
do
to
want to
that.
ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade.
Good
And
answer.
as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's
Sorry,
right
are
to
you
make
talking to me?
decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue
looks
has
like,
been on the
Trump is
ballot
playing
in red
Captain
and blue
Pike
states
in this
votes,
episode.
the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF,
Oh.
I have been a leader. In fact,
He's a
when they got a
fertilization.
very
fact,
negative
I've-
decision
I've-
on IVF,
I've attempted to
Ejaculated so many times.
I saw the people of Alabama
Even
and
when
the
they don't want it.
legislature
I'm
2 days
constantly
later
fertilizing.
voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And
I
the
have
other thing,
fertilized.
They you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question,
you
would you
could,
veto?
you
They
could
allowed
do
it soon.
abortions in the 7th month, the 8th
Oh,
month,
they have
the
turned
9th
on the
month,
mics.
and probably after birth. Just
They've
look
turned
at
on
the
the mics.
governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board
See
in
if
this
she does
country.
something more than
Vice
those
President
stupid
Harris,
hypocrisy
you were
stuff.
tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns,
She loves
drugs,
transnational
and human
criminal
beings.
organizations. She says
And
that.
let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have
Yep.
put
This
1,500
is
more
what she's
border
gonna do.
agents on the
And
border to
he
help those
killed
folks
it.
who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put
90%
more
come through
resources to allow
ports
us
of entry.
to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
That's
And I'll tell
a
you
good
something,
line.
he's
It's
going to talk
unfortunately a
about
good line.
immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm
wish
going to
he'd
actually do something really
go
unusual,
more
and I'm going to invite you
humanely.
to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is
He's
you.
so mad.
You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
big.
President Trump, on that point, I
I'm
want to get your
feeling so
response.
I'd like
validated
to
for
respond.
Let me just ask, though,
coconut
why
tree.
did
People
you
say
try
that,
to
you
kill
look
that
like
bill,
you're
and
on coke.
successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said
I gotta
people
talk
start
about the
leaving.
rallies.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies.
Oh,
in the history
dude,
of
so
politics.
good. He walked
That's
right
because
into
people
it.
want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country
Tangential
by
thinking.
allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States.
They're,
A lot of
Haitians.
towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs.
There you
People
go.
that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating. They're
what can
eating
you
the
do with
pets
this information?
Of the people that
Whether or
live
not it's
there.
true is
And
not
this is
what
what's
matters.
happening in our country.
Though it
and it's
does play a
shame.
role.
As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back.
He's
They
so
want to
mad
make
about
America
this.
great again. It's a very simple phrase.
Really the perfect
Make
insult
America
for
great
him.
again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes
people love my
president,
rallies.
this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success,
we had to
it'll end
turn
up being
people away at the
Venezuela
rally.
on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield,
Oh, here we go.
Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well,
All
I've
this-
seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
People on television saying
Grandpa!
and used for
Right?
food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
The
Again,
people that went
She's looking
there.
sorry
says
for him.
There's no evidence of that.
do it.
Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest.
We'll find out about the dogs.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of
No.
former Vice
Oh,
President
please don't.
Dick Cheney.
No!
Member Liz Cheney.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of
And
valor.
if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His
he's
former
getting
national
so
security
mad.
advisor
Look
has
at his-
said he is
look at his
dangerous
mouth.
and
Yeah.
unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people
calling him
are
extreme
not
is
being
good, more than
addressed,
conservative.
I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes
This
a
is
book.
kitchen
Another one
table
writes a
issues.
book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But
Yep.
they have
Everyone
done
knows who
such
Mark
a
Esper
poor
is.
job. And they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know
I think it's
you
more
believe
than
that number is
21.
much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much
Yeah.
higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela
Scream louder,
and crime
sir.
in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it
is
because they think
yelling.
they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country.
The fabric.
Millions of people.
You gotta
that-
blame the
and
real
all over the world,
people who are to blame for
crime
the
is
housing
down
shortage.
all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's
Migrant.
happening at levels that nobody
Oh,
thought
a lot of
He
people
wishes he
covering
could
that
do
one.
I know the
migrant.
FBI says
That was
overall
his new
violent
term.
crime
It
is
was
actually coming
migrant
down in
back
this
in the
country.
day.
But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris, I'll
FBI
give you the-
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities.
Oh,
They
crime is
didn't
down.
include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
What show is
Just
this?
like their
Fraud.
818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
I
Well,
saw it
think
on
this
TV.
is so
Should be a
rich,
drop.
Coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same
She
old
has
tired
managed to
rhetoric
take the mantle
and address
of the
needs
change
of
agent
the
here.
American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases
He
was
doesn't have the
started by
discipline to
them
say,
against their
"She's not the
political
change
opponent.
candidate I
And I'm
am."
winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came
All
down
of my
just
crimes.
recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ,
Everyone.
from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty
There you go,
on the
Bradley.
documents
And where
case.
is he?
And what happened in my
God, I
documents
miss
case?
him.
They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump.
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political
They're also,
enemies.
she's doing a good job
Someone
of
who
like
has
reminding
openly
people of like
expressed
the
disdain
the exhaustion.
for members of
Yeah.
our
That comes
military.
from Trump.
That's why
Understand
the
what it
context
would
of
mean if
COVID,
Donald
too.
Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
Weaponized, please.
We got to
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
This is
I
the one.
probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
Wow.
They talk about
Whoa.
democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat
the
to
earlobe.
democracy. With
I'm
the
a
fake
threat. He
Russia,
said the
Russia,
words.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Russia,
Vice
Russia,
President
Russia.
Harris, in your
Stop
last
talking
run
about the
for president,
assassination
you
attempt. We
said
gotta
you
move on to
wanted
important
ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking.
Right.
My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we
Cynical.
reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the
already did this.
largest
The Trump eyelids are
increase
flaring.
in
He's sundown.
domestic oil
He's about to get real
production in
cranky.
history. because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the
She only went
importance of
specific
home
on
ownership,
fracking.
knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable.
Let's go for the
My
QAnon
work
vote.
that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great
Oh, my
father, and I
God.
learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that,
He was
a
at a
tiny
Nazi rally in
fraction.
the 40s.
And I built it into many, many
probably
billions
200
of dollars,
million.
many,
And a
many billions.
Rolodex.
And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that.
We should.
Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up.
Oh, no, she's
very
against defund the police.
wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. Oh, you know,
Oh, Mr.
He used it.
familiar?
Sound familiar?
She
You
went
said
out.
that to Pence, and that always bothered
went
me.
out
That always
Minnesota.
bothered me.
That's
And wanted to
but
let
that doesn't
criminals
play
that killed
going out
people
against a woman.
and burned
Yeah.
down Minneapolis.
I didn't like that shit
She
when
went
you did
out
it
and
to
raised
Mike.
money to get him out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender
his own ass.
operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is
What?
a radical
He
liberal
wants to
that
what?
will do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania.
What
If
she
won the
won't tell you,
election,
she's a
fracking
surgeon.
in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important
Okay.
in my opinion. So I got the oil business
why was I
going like
worried about
nobody has
this
ever
at
done
all?
before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills and we'll go back to solar where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of
Tangential
solar.
thinking.
But they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank
Gotta be
you.
quick.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election.
And the
in
shark will get
66
electrocuted.
days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a
Oh,
cornerstone
we
of our
gotta
democracy
harp
and
on
the role
this.
of a president in a moment of crisis.
Actually, she's
Mr.
not
President,
doing the
on
peaceful
January
transfer.
6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them.
Well-
The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer.
Wow.
That should have never, ever shot her. It's a
Trump got her
disgrace.
killed with lies.
But we didn't do this
Police
group
union
of
endorsed
people
this dude,
that
by
have
the
been
way.
treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed
love
by the
how
border. In
much
fact, she
he's
said at the beginning,
diluting
I'm
his
surprised you're not
immigration
talking
stuff by
about the border
bringing
yet.
it back to
That's
that every
because
single
she
time.
knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world.
That's
David.
eating
All over the
cats
world.
and dogs.
Crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask-
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city
Oh,
of Seattle.
boy.
When are those people going to be prosecuted?
Okay,
But
Grandpa.
let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big.
Give 'em all the
I
time.
went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me, it was
riot.
done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi
Right.
and the
Christine
mayor of
Pelosi's
Washington
documentary
did their
film.
jobs. I
They
wasn't
controlled my
responsible
hogs
for
for me.
security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what
getting to
January
the head
6th
shaking
was,
portion.
He doesn't want to be
I
doing this
say
right now.
we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're
She
not
keeps
going
doing this
back.
thing.
It's time to turn
good.
the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath
He
if
literally
this
said
and the
that
outcome of this
2 days
election
ago.
is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all
All
these people.
of the
they
most
covered it.
right-wing
If they go
fanatics.
An extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you
It's
this,
so
you talk
unfair.
about
As he is
the
bringing it
Capitol.
up.
Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll
can't.
tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to,
He's
because
flirting
she's
here.
been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have
He
the
doesn't
right
know
to
how
do
the
it. They don't
government
need
works.
bills. They have the right to do it. The president of
She
the United
can't
States, you'll
sign a
get him
bill.
out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign
and
a
I
bill.
miss him. I do
if
miss him. I
If
wish he
he
was here.
signs a bill that the border
He's
is
really
closed, all he
losing
has to
it
do
now.
is say it to the Border Patrol, who are
We're not
phenomenal.
halfway done yet.
If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people,
I wanna-
unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to
J6.
focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really
I'm
brings
I'm in the
this
know.
into focus. Truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide.
Yeah.
In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came
Sorry,
up a bit
Ashley.
short.
I
Are
said
you,
that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in
No, I
2020?
don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically. You
But
know
those-
that. It was
Oh, with
we
Lex
lost by a
Friedman? Let's
whisker.
look that up.
I
What?
said sarcastically. Look.
Well, I said it
there's so much proof.
sarcastically.
It wasn't.
What?
Well, I've
Look
seen the
at it.
clip.
And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten.
Yeah, less
I was
than
told
Biden,
if I
you
got
old bastard.
63,
Except
which was
for
what I
Biden got
in
more.
2016.
Ding dong.
You can't be beaten.
Population
The
grows,
election,
idiot.
People should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
No
I did watch
entiendo.
all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the
Yo
sarcasm.
quiero
Lost by a whisper.
vote.
We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said
They
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality.
means they looked at it.
Can you imagine a system where a person in
Oh
an
my God,
election
this
doesn't
is
have
like-
standing?
By the
The
way,
president
If
of the
Harris sat
United
down and
States
wrote out,
doesn't have standing.
hopefully he'll spend
That's how
20
we
minutes
lost.
debating
If you
the
look at
finer
facts,
points
and
of what
I'd love
Rudy
to have you
Giuliani
do a
was doing.
special on
As far as
it.
like taking the
I'll
bait, it's
show
like every
you
time she's put her line in the
Georgia, and I'll
water
show you
immediately.
Half of
Wisconsin,
people
and I'll
tune
show
out
you
already, and then the other
Pennsylvania,
half
and
are
I'll
like,
show-
are they?
We have
Is
so
he
many
really doing
facts and
this again?
statistics.
Even the
But you
guys
know
that are
what?
voting for him.
That doesn't matter because we
Guys.
have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a
they
nation
said,
in decline.
Rudy Giuliani,
and they have put it
9/11
into
in a
decline.
verb.
We
This
have a
guy,
nation
immigration
that is
and no
dying.
other
Yeah.
words.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and
Insane
yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly
Yeah,
he is
she
having
did
a
it.
very difficult
She's-
time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you,
We're at the
and they
richest
say
written
you're a
portion.
disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in
Total
a
beta.
presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election.
She should bring up
It
Giuliani.
leads one to believe that perhaps we do
Remind
not have
people of
in
the
the candidate
cast
to
of
my right the
clowns.
temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
Biden
give you 1
coming.
minute to respond,
Biden
Mr.
mentioned
Let me
coming.
just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid
The fuck
of him.
I give about
China was
Hungary?
afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one. But he
Biden,
ended
you were
the
right,
XL
Bradley.
pipeline.
Immediate Biden
The
mention.
XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most
Everybody's
feared
like,
person
what?
is
Hungary?
Donald Trump.
Is that a country?
Googling
He had
Hungary,
no problems when Trump was
Hungry.
president.
Yeah, see
But
if
when this
Hungary is
weak,
trending on
pathetic
Google right
man
now.
that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got
And
no
I do
votes.
win in,
He got 14
Reddit
million
conservative,
votes. What you
full
did-
of people
you talk
screaming
about
that
a threat to
ABC deep
democracy.
state cultural
He
Marxist.
got 14
Yeah,
million
I mean,
votes, and they
I
threw him out
could
of
see how
office.
they.
And why is
And
he
you know what?
here?
I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got
President.
14
Good.
million votes. They threw him out.
You're
She
supposed
got
to be here.
0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very
Okay,
well.
he
We've got a
bitched.
lot more to
Sounds like somebody who's really okay with this.
You were right about this, Bradley. He's already bitching about Biden dropping out.
Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young
Well,
people who were simply attending a concert.
According to
Yeah.
Women were
Haaretz and
horribly
Hannibal Directive.
And
we
so,
don't know.
absolutely, I said then, I say now.
I lost my Hannibal
Israel
Directive bet.
has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many
Just memorize
innocent
this.
Palestinians have been killed.
It's the exact same
Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a
Rocking around
course
the
for a
clock.
two-state solution.
Oh my God,
And
it's the
in
same
that
shit.
solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I
Iron
will
Dome for
always give
Palestine?
Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages
would have
out
never
and
happened
prevent the
if I was
killing of
president.
more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of
Why
it
would
either,
he
by the way,
say
for 4
that?
years.
We'll get to
have
Russia
gone
later,
into
buddy.
Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with
This
Netanyahu
is
when
her
he went to
open-
Congress to make a very important speech.
opening
She
about-
refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party.
Insulting the black
She
sorority.
hates
Good
Israel.
idea.
If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm
Inshallah.
wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way,
Can we get that in
she
writing?
hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone.
He won't even say
It would have
Palestinian.
never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror.
Spheres
Horrible
of terror. I just came
they
up
had
with
no
that.
money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were
Thesaurus
broke.
axis.
Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice
Why don't you
President
just do
Harris
it
says
now,
he hates
dude?
Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that.
Okay,
He's trying
great.
to, again, divide and distract from the reality,
Say the
which is
Palestinian
it is
sort of
very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself.
Bring
It is
back
well
Orban, and what
known
did you say about
that he
Putin?
said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
Oh,
And that
I like
is
that.
why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the
See, the
year,
weak thing triggered him.
168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way
Oh,
down.
immigration.
Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is
He
absolutely
just said,
incredible. It
last
wouldn't have
question,
happened with
that
me.
he knows him
The
very
leaders
well, and he'd
of
work
other
well with him.
countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that
Where
Russia's
is
ever
he, and
made,
why
Nord
can't I
Stream
talk to
2,
him?
the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues
Should
to
be
get
here
to.
with me.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC
All right,
News
folks.
presidential
I'm going
debate
to run
from
and
the
get a
National
drink.
Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia.
Analysis.
Back.
Go.
Oh, okay. I was hoping to get a drink, but you know, you can go off and no, it's okay. I'm really just joking around. I don't know what to say. I think she did a phenomenal job
I think
so
Trump's
far.
doing great and comporting himself with the utmost composure and
No,
and,
like the reality is like, I mean, again, the politics of what she's saying are not our politics, but it's about what plays to most people. Like, I mean, the
And
authoritarian
personal conduct.
Yeah, I mean, even the China hawkery, which is something I've criticized the Biden administration for orienting their policy towards, like that plays well in the way that she framed it in terms of competition with China. She did a good job on that front.
I mean, it is brain dead. I do want to underline talking about quantum computing.
Yeah, it's silly, but
Okay.
but she's trying to allude to the CHIPS Act, which was like a decent, like, I don't know, onshore investing in that kind of technology, but still within the like context of competing with China, which
Give
I
a bunch
don't
of
love.
money to
but,
Intel so they can lay people off.
I
But,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, right. I've been the leader in fertilization. Trump said about IVF. Trump.
It's true. Actually, I've fertilized a lot of people.
the country buster that is
Yeah.
inflation.
And the only thing she was specific on as it related to her flip-flopping was the fracking thing. So the other stuff, she's like not really, in terms of like healthcare, she's avoidant on that front. It's just like a mercenary like decision to be like, I'm pro fracking because Pennsylvania's maybe the closest swing state of the three. It's
Right.
definitely the closest of the three Rust Belt
Oh
states.
yeah, and it's the most. It has the most
Electoral votes, yeah.
votes. I mean, I think. Look, just analyzing this from the perspective of the undecided voter whom they are definitely catering to, at least the Harris campaign is. She wants to be the change candidate. And I think she has definitely achieved that. She wants to remind the American public that Donald Trump brings chaos.
And obsessed with his own drama.
And is obsessed with his own drama. And I think like she has forced him to get there. She was very strong on abortion. She put him into a tough position with his own supporters in terms of like him saying, you know, no abortion ban.
I haven't talked to JD about that. Actually, I don't know what he was talking about, and we don't have to discuss it.
I mean, in terms of like sowing him as the chaos thing, it's like you don't want to go back to that. Very effective. I would say the only thing that with some cohort, and it's usually like the men, and that's who, you know, Trump is playing to, this idea that he is so strong that he would scare all the, you know, other countries from doing anything, I think is somewhat effective. But that's, you know, that's going to happen. Like, I mean, I think that's baked into the cake.
Right.
There's those guys who are open to that don't believe a woman is ever going to be there. And I have to say that, like, you know, relatively speaking, waking up at 2 a.m, you know, or 3 a.m, thinking about this, it wasn't hard for me to imagine that Harris was going to go completely bat crap crazy in trying to prove that she's, you know, Margaret Thatcher.
Exactly.
Or, and to a large extent, she has, I think, like, been very effective in not having to sort of, I mean, I think we see that a little bit in the China rhetoric, and I think we see that, but
immigration too. I mean, there's no plan except to point out his hypocrisy, but her thinking is, I don't need any other thing because all that does is trigger him. I mean, what does she need to present?
The line where she said he wants to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. Like, again, this type of pablum I can't stand.
Yeah.
But this debate is not for me. I mean, it's not for you, and for many respects, it's not for anybody watching who are, you know, do this on a regular basis and follow politics. It is that whole like problem solver mentality. Why can't they get along? Why can't we do stuff? She wants to get stuff done. You know, it's baby brained politics. But that's what.
But I think about like the undecided voter in my head. We all have family members, or like the stuff that's strong on the military, where she looks like she has a plan on certain topics. Like, I mean, the abortion stuff is going to be really good for her to drive female turnout, I think. But even the stuff on the economy at the
Live
beginning.
from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I mean, I
Here
wish the
again,
media gave a shit
David
about
Muir
the genocide
and
we're
Lindsay
committing, because
Davis.
they could have followed up.
Welcome back to this
on that,
historic
but-
ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years.
Wouldn't have happened if I had
Mr.
been
President,
president.
It has
I
been
know,
the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best
People
interest
are
to do so,
posting
arguing that if Putin
photos of
wins,
their
he may be
husbands
emboldened to
pretending to
move
eat
even
their
further into other
pets,
countries.
saying, "My
You have
immigrant
said you would
husband."
solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How
I
exactly
can't believe
would
you
you do
repeated
that?
that,
And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look,
Everything you have is fake.
we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How
it's
would
so
you respect
desperate
him?
him
Why?
calling
For
himself
what
your
reason?
president
He hasn't
when
even
he's
made
not.
a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president.
Last
if I win,
answer, he said
when I'm
Putin wants her to be
president-elect,
elected.
and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't
will
even
only
know.
address,
Where is our
He
president?
will.
We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here-
threw
Where
him
is
out
he?
of a
Why isn't he
campaign
speaking
like
to
a
me?
dog.
Here we
don't
go.
even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
I miss him
Your time is
so
up.
He doesn't know
much.
he's alive.
Just to clarify
Desperate.
the
This is,
question.
it still keeps
Do you believe it's
distancing
in the
herself.
U.S. best interest
her from
for
him.
Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief,
I am
if
interested what
elected,
her Ukraine
how would you
policy
deal
would
with
be.
Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24
With
hours is because
distance.
he would just give it up.
For her.
And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done
Biden's
to
crying so
preserve
hard right now.
the ability of Zelensky and the
NATO
Ukrainians to
portion.
fight for their independence.
That you go get it, girl.
Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting
legacy,
with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of
Ooh, there you go.
favor and what
That's
you
pretty
think is
specific.
a friendship
Yep.
with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please.
300,000?
He would have been sitting in Moscow,
Yeah.
much happier than he is right now. But eventually,
Can you
he's
say
got a
quiet, please,
thing
to
that
her?
other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually,
I'm the first person
maybe
to
he'll
think
use them,
about
and
that.
maybe
What's
he
with them,
hasn't been
like-
that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. and the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President?
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our
Whoa.
country. But let me tell you something. She is a
means a lot
horrible
coming from you.
negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir
screaming
Putin? Can you
now.
clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what
Bring
is
up
at
Orban
stake here.
from earlier.
The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
He was cooking for a
got
second.
these countries, the 28
He was
countries
marinated.
at the time.
Is he still
to
talking
pay
about
up.
Orban?
He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying
He was
almost
flattering you,
all of
Dominic.
NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen.
I
Thank
don't
you.
want to
I wanna turn
brag.
to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result,
The actual
America's
courage.
taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down.
Oh, she's
He
hitting him
bypassed
on
the Afghan
deals.
government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders.
I had forgotten about that.
And
Actually, that was
this former president, as president, invited them
that's good.
to Camp David
What was she about to
because
do?
he does
This
not
fucking
again
idiot.
Motherfucker.
appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect
soldiers
of the
things.
United
Yep.
States of America
Arlington
around the
controversy.
world.
Vice President Harris,
just
thank
the
you.
Arlington,
President
too,
Trump, your
also the,
response to her saying that
presidential
you began the
medal.
negotiations
Yeah,
with
thank
the
you.
Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was
Backwards.
killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the
Just like that
Taliban
woman in the
because the
West End.
Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. but I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban.
Abdullah.
And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore,
Abdul,
you're gonna have
yeah,
problems.
you're gonna don't do
And
it
he said,
anymore.
why do you
Can't do
send
it,
me a picture of
Vladimir.
my
You do
house? I
it,
said, you're
it's
going to
gonna
have
be
to
a
figure that
bad
out,
day.
Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement.
Not me.
The reason
He
I'm
did it.
anti-war.
But anyway.
Mike Pompeo did
we
my
were getting out. We
negotiations.
would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind.
But she cares
And
more
just to
about than the
finish,
Americans.
They blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I wanna move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion,
move
the
on.
most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you.
Her boss is not
I want to
gonna
move
play
on now
well.
to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago.
Let's go.
When she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight.
What's wrong
Why
with
do you
you?
believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care.
That's why I mentioned it.
You make a
unprompted.
big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I don't
asking.
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black,
It's a racist
That she
grandpa
put
getting
out.
caught.
and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Same old playbook.
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual
There.
who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
Wait. I need to
Go back on race.
I need to
presidency
I'd like to scream a little
in the
bit.
history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're
Whatever's
destroying our
rubber, I'm rubber,
country.
you're glue.
And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted,
Been name
they
dropping.
said they pled guilty.
At like a 12-1
and I
rate.
said, well, if
with
they
her?
pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that
is
has
he
to
going
stretch
through
back
that?
years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world.
And so
I'm
what
gonna
if I
build
didn't
it
rent to
again.
blacks?
It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. but they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single
question
policy.
is-
And remember this.
Does he ask for a
She is
second
Biden.
debate now?
You know, she's trying to get away
Oh,
from Biden. I
he
don't know
may.
the gentleman. She says, she is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad,
Biden, where is he?
and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
There we go.
One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism.
There's no red America.
About what we
There's
can
no
do
blue
instead
America.
of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan
Sort of
that is
Warren-esque,
about
isn't it?
allowing people to be
I
able
was-
to pursue
I was
what has
thinking
been
that, but I didn't
fleeting in
wanna-
terms of the American dream by offering a help
a
with
reason
We need to
down
show
payment of
competency. We need to show
$25,000 down payment
competency.
assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's guns.
She's a great cook. She has a
She has a
plan.
plan to not allow fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond.
President
because,
Trump-
no, the
President
former
Trump-
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just need to
move
respond
on, Vice
to
Say, I
President.
can make a
what he
plan.
said
President Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act,
She can let it
also
go.
known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9
he's
years
John
after you
McCain.
first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was.
Oh.
It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things.
Yes, but
we're
we
gonna
got-
do it, and
we're,
gonna replace
3
it.
weeks
But
away.
remember
And it's not
this.
Project
I
2025.
inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people
Can we
in
have
this.
some social
I fired
security
her. How about some
Medicare
names?
talk
We read about
soon,
the bad
please?
ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just
Tangential
explain.
thinking.
I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president.
Why we need
But
to take that as a drop.
I've said
we
that.
come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do
And
that.
specifications.
And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Oh,
President
yes.
Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan
I
today?
didn't mean any
Well,
of
first
that.
of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But What we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that
Come
the
on.
former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Roll up on
As
it.
it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just
Imhoff
look at
with
the
a
history
Glock?
to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president,
passenger seat.
60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being
Well,
she's going
you
for
don't like
Haley
him, you
voters.
said at
Look
the
at the-
time
look at his
because
face. I wish
he
they were
got
doing a
caught.
close-up.
He was an
It's like,
American
well-
hero. The late great John McCain, I
He
will
wants to
never
get some
forget that
McCain.
night.
The
Walked
late
onto
great
the Senate
Hannibal
floor
Lecter on
and
the other
said,
side.
"No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan." And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma?
See, this is
if
the
someone was a
patient
breast
protection
cancer
part,
survivor,
not the
if a
Affordable Care
grandparent
part.
had diabetes?
So,
And thankfully,
look up the bill's
as
name.
I've been vice president and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get
If
rid
it's
of it.
genuinely a
That's
right,
just
President
pro-law
Harris,
money
in terms
would
of where
not.
Donald Trump stands on that.
I want
Yeah.
to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake.
What does she mean by
Number
strengthen
one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money.
have some
But she
concepts.
won't improve private insurance for people,
Obama was
private
president.
medical insurance.
That's
Two
what
presidents
Obama
That's
does.
ago.
another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months
she
for an
don't. I wish.
operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's
thank you,
important for a
Grandpa.
number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard
really
to the
can't believe
environment,
they
you
spent-
say that
well,
we
I
have
can.
to have
They spent
clean
very
air
little
and
time on
clean
Gaza.
water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat.
Zionist, yeah.
The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic
windmills
gas
are killing the
production
birds.
to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of
He's about to shit on
building
Fain.
a clean energy economy includes investing in
can't say he
American-made
has
products,
O'Brien's
American
endorsement.
automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't
They
go after
added
people because
manufacturing jobs.
supposedly
He
China
lost
paid him millions
net
of dollars. He's
under
afraid
his
to do it.
presidency.
Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of
Here
these
we
different
go.
countries.
He wants to go down
And
this
then you
road?
wonder, why is
Get
he
him on the
so
phone.
loyal to
Get him
this
on the
one, that
phone.
one, Ukraine, China? Why is he?
No one
why
gives a
did he get
shit about
$3.5
Hunter Biden. You're
million
running against
from
Kamala
the mayor
Harris.
Of Moscow's wife. Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back
Yes,
with closing
thank you so
statements from
much.
both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News
Oh, this
presidential
is
debate.
going to
From
end early.
Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Well, they do their closing statements, and then we'll be done by like 11, right?
It looks like
Yeah.
I would guess that we're going to be done by 10:45.
Yeah, Trump needs to head out and scream into a pillow or something for a second, and then we'll wrap up.
I mean, I gotta say, my sense is, you know, obviously, I would have loved her to say some different things, but from the perspective of assessing what their agenda was, the her campaign people have to be ecstatic.
Yeah, I mean,
Can
they're
we move up the time for our going live on the main channel? We can do. I think. Okay. So, folks, as
I
soon
doubt
as we
they're-
are done here, we're going to be over on the live
Yeah.
on the main channel, which you guys are on my phone. For whatever reason, there's 3,300 people looking at the side of my head and hearing nothing except for you and I talking, not the actual debate. But maybe you're listening at home, and then we'll do the debate wrap up. But I mean, there are Harris campaign people who are just like fist bumping right now. I mean, I don't think they're, you know,
It's not
this isn't-
as big
this isn't-
as the last debate, but it is.
No, this is
similar.
not. And I don't want to, people
Yeah.
misunderstand. This is not a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But the point is that Harris could not have done better, and
yeah.
and you know, Trump didn't have a total meltdown, but in terms of like where we are in the race and what you could anticipate, this was sort of like Harris needed to come out and just seem like she's competent, normal, and a change agent. And I don't know how it's received, but in terms of her executing it, that's what she did.
We were right about Harris and how she'd be so much better than Joe Biden this entire
were right.
time.
Oh my God.
Like,
I mean, honestly, this time in the last debate,
I thought that was
we were
gonna
all
jump out the
catatonic.
window. Yeah.
no, I'm like, oh well, Trump's the president.
Yeah, I'll save mine now. I want to digest it like with their closing statements here a little bit, and then I don't think that we can rule out a slam dunk in this situation. I mean, it's pretty resounding.
I always contend at the end of debates that like I can't really fully assess because it's really not targeted towards us. Like, you know, I don't.
But we're
frankly,
we're acknowledging the fact that even the rhetoric that we're saying, like the stuff about, you know, I don't know, the China hawkishness, that's not my politics. But do I think that plays?
It's the
I
Democratic
do.
Party's politics, and she's way better at elaborating it than Joe Biden was.
Right.
And it's
Exactly.
not
But
close.
even stuff like her, like, let's all get along. Why are we dividing? Why can't we don't want to go back? I mean, like, frankly, like, look, I don't think we can all get along.
we have to crush them.
But I understand that, you know,
But that's what I'm. But this
There's
is
a lot
also
of
a
people-
display of partisanship. Have we heard bipartisanship from her one time?
no,
Except
actually,
the,
the word
immigration
no.
bill.
Actually, that is the interesting thing, and that's a great point. All of her, where Obama said there's no red America, blue America, she didn't talk about a political divide. She was talking about more of like a social divide. She was like getting underneath the politics. And that I think is really a good point. Like she didn't say, well, I'm bipartisan. She just said like neighbor to neighbor. It's Tim Walz.
I was just going to say, which is what Walz
but
says.
she picked Walz, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Walz crucially says the thing about we don't want to be at Thanksgiving having these
Right.
upsetting conversations. It
This
is
is what
political in nature. It's just not
Mind
about-
your own damn
her
business.
politics are better than Biden's, just like from where she's come from a more activist family than Obama, right, as well. Like I think she just is a little more partisan, and also the party is in a better position
Right.
to be more partisan.
also-
So it's a good
With the
marriage.
caveat that there's a tech stink on her that doesn't exist on Biden, I don't think. But
the texting, yeah.
Oh,
well,
I mean, talking about what policies are going to be.
Tony West, yeah.
It is and done. I mean,
Well, you guys, I don't know if you guys saw
I'm
the
not trying to
American
oversell
Prospect.
it.
Oh, yeah.
That her
her
one of
debate
what-
prep
is
is Catherine Dunn, I think her name is.
she's representing
Karen.
she's
Karen Dunn.
She's representing Google in the
She
antitrust suit.
during the day she is doing debate prep. At night she's preparing to literally be the lead litigator.
No.
in,
I'm
the
not saying
Google
she's
case.
Bernie Sanders, but do I think that maybe like slightly?
David Muir
I think she's
and
better than
Lindsay
Biden
Davis.
from
Well,
her
Welcome
record.
back
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
These two, I say, did a good job.
So I think you've
Actual
heard
fact
tonight
checking.
two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future,
Yep.
and the other that is focused on the past,
Bingo.
and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families,
this isn't
in what
for
we can
us,
do around
but swing
protecting
voters like
seniors,
this.
what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I
your
never
client.
asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only
Such
thing I
lawyer
ever
speak.
asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things.
Wine.
Why hasn't she done it?
Bro,
She's
you
been
were
there
also
for
the
3.5
president.
years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things
You were
we
in for
talked
4 and
about.
they kicked you out.
Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get
I
everyone
miss it
together
so
and do the
much.
things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because
He
you
can't
believe in
deliver this
things that
attack.
the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for
Wait,
it.
wait, can we go
can't
to Fox
sacrifice
News
our
maybe
country
before we
for the
even
sake
go?
of bad vision. But I just ask one
wanna-
simple
I'm
question.
We'll switch to Fox
Why
News and then just
didn't
go
she
live
do
with
it?
Go
Fox
live.
News.
We're a
You think that they
nation.
won't crack down
We're a
on-
nation that's in serious
Fox won't.
decline.
Okay.
We're being laughed at
Nobody
all
cares
over the
about
world.
the,
all over the
I
world,
wanna
they're
hear what
laughed.
they
I
have
know
to
the
say.
leaders very well. They're coming to
So
see
just be
me.
immediately
They call
ready
me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We
Viktor
have wars
Orban
going
said
on in the
embrace
Middle
Trump.
East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry.
really Tim
I
Pool stuff.
rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe
Take our
toughest of all, is
military,
allowing
Afghanistan.
millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank
and that
you.
is our ABC News presidential debate. From
Okay,
here in
switch it over
Philadelphia,
to
the
Fox
National
News.
Constitution
Folks,
Center.
we are heading right now to our main channel. I'm going to end this side thing. Thank you for hanging out. I don't know why you did, but I'm going to shut down the, I'll figure it out in a second. We're heading over to youtube.com/Sam Cedar. Join us there right now. What?
Oh.
Well, we're signing off, and then we'll go right there. And I just ended my stream.
So we should be live on the main feed now. I'm going to cut the old one.
All right, put this volume up.
The debate, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Never fully received an answer there. However, Vice President Harris was clearly well prepared, practiced on the offensive much of the night.
guys.
Former President Trump did take
We
a
are
lot
back.
of debate that she threw out in some of those answers, but he
We'll give
pointed
you our
time and
analysis
again, as
soon,
he
but
did there
wanted
at
to
the
hear
end,
what Fox has
about
to
what
say.
she has or has not done as Vice President. The question now is, how much does this move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be said that she was really never held to the fire. She was not pressed
She
by
was.
the moderators
Here we go.
on her past positions.
Now we know.
and how she got from a very progressive, most progressive senator to where she is now. And that falls on ABC. And I think there were moments when it felt like they were helping her out and they were not helping him out. There were times when he didn't pivot as well as he should have to move on to some of the points that he no doubt wanted to make. He went down a few cat and dog holes. Rather than rabbit holes tonight, which will be discussed, no doubt. I thought the strongest moments were foreign policy, Iran, when he talked about Ukraine, Afghanistan, and that closed. Why haven't you done it?
Okay, let's go around the horn.
Wow, there you go. I mean,
Well, I thought the
ABC was
single question that needed to be answered tonight was, Madam Vice President, why have you changed your position? Give us your thoughts on why you changed your position, not just on the handful, the